The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
Giles and the Goalie Podcast, the only Minnesota Wild podcast hosted by two guys who know absolutely nothing about the Minnesota Wild. I am your host, Giles Farrell. Joining me, as always, is Ben Remington.
Hello.
Ben, I had a grind my gears lined up, locked and loaded for this episode on the NHL and their award show host every year, which is always some third-rate celebrity that they just pull out of a Vegas casino and knows nothing about anything. And this year, it kind of looked like it was going to be Keenan Thompson as he did some promos for the NHL award show, but I guess he just felt like doing some promos for the NHL award show. So he's not actually the host, and the NHL is just hosting it themselves, meaning players, coaches, general managers are going to fill the void. So I'm curious to see how that's going to roll. But it'll just be a lot of blank stares and ums and ahs and bad punchlines.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm dreaming, but maybe we see like an Alexander Ovechkin do like a Yakov Smirnoff kind of thing.
Oh, God.
Opening monologue, I kind of would dig that.
The only way this show is good is if drunk Alex Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals show up.
Only they can save it. But seriously, like, I mean, not that I'm the world's biggest Keenan Thompson fan, but what would be wrong with him? I mean, kind of doing a very light duty hosting kind of thing. Like,
well, here's
not that he's got a ton of credit, but at least he was Russ Tyler,
right? But here's how I figured the NHL found their way to Keenan Thompson, which this is all just irrelevant now, but I'm going to share how my thought process went here is, and for whatever SNL was popular this year for probably their sketches concerning a certain politician who I'll leave nameless.
Yep.
But NBC is the rights holder of the NHL.
Right.
So they're probably like, oh, maybe we can get a Saturday Night Live cast member to host the award show. Good old NBC family spirit. Good connectivity. So they get halfway down the list and find nobody really with any hockey ties.
Right.
And then they land at Keenan Thompson and go, oh man, Keenan Thompson was in the Mighty Ducks trilogy as Russ Tyler. There's your host.
Speaking of SNL, you know who absolutely should have hosted this awards? Chance the Rapper.
Yes, that's how I got there. That was the thing that blew up for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
But
like how, and they could have had fun with it too, because the whole joke was, he's a black guy that doesn't know hockey because I would the racial jokes is kind of write themselves there. So, like, why not roll with that? Like, you don't have to make it an entire bit. Like, keep pretending that he doesn't know hockey, but just kind of, I mean, what's wrong with kind of for once confronting the fact that you have a host that doesn't know anything about the NHL? I mean, How many times have we had to suffer through D-list comedians that, maybe they were hockey fans, but they certainly didn't have any good hockey material written. It's like, might as well just embrace it. Have Chance the Rapper go out there and talk about how he can't pronounce Scandinavian names. It would be awesome.
I don't even remember who hosted last year. It was bad. And it was the expansion draft roped in.
Was it Rob Riggle?
No, Rob Riggle was a couple of years ago.
I don't remember either.
Yeah, it was bad. It was forgettable.
Yeah.
But anyway.
There's so many. I'm a big comedy nerd, and there's just so many comedians that should host that instead of the people that they choose.
And another thing I argue is maybe they just don't shoot high enough. Like, they just... I don't know. Like...
Right. Like, they don't realize they're a top 4 sport in the United States.
Just shoot high, and, like, if
right.
people say no, you tried, but somebody will say yes. Like, every celebrity has a price.
Right.
So, pay him whatever and kick in some money at the craps table or whatever.
At the very least, like, you can find celebrities that at least are known hockey fans. Like, at least reach out to Matthew Perry or, Kevin Smith would be a great one. I don't know why they insist on, booking this like it's some kind of, backwoods casino Friday night. It's not the same thing.
Or have somebody Vegas themed host the show. I mean, it was the year of Vegas. Like,
right.
Somebody there will host. Like, maybe not Penn and Teller. Those guys are kind of dry.
I mean, but even that would be interesting. You know what I mean? Like, not to say that I would definitely watch it because I just kind of hate award shows as a rule, but
have the dudes who do shows with the Tiger host.
Siegfried and Roy.
Yeah.
I think they're like 70 and retired now after one of them got his face eaten.
I don't care. Get him up there and let's get Cody McLeod up there and get his face eaten.
You just now accepting the award for biggest douche canoe, Gabriel Landeskog. Come eat the Tiger.
Yeah, everyone I dislike is on the list, and there you go. Oh, by God, that's Matt Cook's music. All right, now that
tremendous.
I did have a grind my gears lined up, but we kind of got to it. But I was gonna just give you the floor on the preseason schedule reveal that you so aptly love.
So the Wild play one preseason game on a Saturday night. One. And, of course, it's at home. And, of course, it's the night of my wedding, which happens to be down the street from the Xcel Energy Center. I'm not thrilled. Any other night to have a Wild game, I think I would have been fine with. But, what do you do? It is what it is. It shouldn't affect the wedding too much. I would hope. I'm more worried about the parking situation for my guests. But whatever.
I'm just gonna get a ride there and not worry about
that'd probably be the best way to go.
And I was already gonna get a ride because, there's alcohol.
Right.
We know how that goes.
Yeah. There will be lots of alcohol.
I appreciated your invite at the top that said, "No kids, please." That's a pros move right there. Yeah,
we've got plenty of friends that have young kids, obviously. But I just, and I'm not a parent, so people can crucify me all they want, but I don't understand people, like, actually wanting to bring their kids to a wedding. Like, I just don't. I don't know. I've got little brothers. I've had to corral them many times. And just having shrieking children at a wedding, I don't know. That and it's so expensive and, like, I don't know. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun adult-only party.
I just realized the climate in which we're complaining about children in, and I might cut this out.
That's fine.
I might leave it in.
Yeah, I might leave it in.
We'll see. Maybe I'll ask
I'm not caging the children.
Yeah. All right, we're really going down a rabbit hole here.
I know, right?
Okay, so the preseason schedule was announced in the last week, and really that was the only bit of news we got. And why would we ever get anything else? But it's just same old stuff, except the Wild do play one game in Des Moines at Wells Fargo Arena, which I would encourage people to do. Even as during the week, I still encourage people to go down and check it out. It is fun, and I can give you pointers on where to go in Des Moines. I know people aren't thrilled with that, but it's, as I publicly admitted before on this podcast, Des Moines is not that bad of a town. So
No,
there you go.
it's not bad.
Regular season schedule comes out later in the week. Thursday appears to be the date, or the home openers get announced Wednesday, and then the schedule gets revealed Thursday in an almost NFL-like way to announce your schedule. Just milk the crap out of it. But do you have any schedule-related hot takes, or should we just move the hell on?
I mean, just it's only newsworthy to me because I want to find out when the Wild are in Vegas. That's literally it.
Yes, the Wild supposedly will have 2 trips to Las Vegas next year to play the Golden Knights. So
Yes.
that will be fun, and I will continue to beg Tom Schreier to open the luscious zone coverage budget for this podcast to go.
I mean, we sent Brandon Warren to Kansas City. Las Vegas is basically the same thing.
Same thing.
I
Very
mean,
much the same.
It's a real cheap town to visit, and we're going there professionally. I don't
Yeah.
see the difference.
Professionally. That's the key word here.
Yes, professionally professional.
Yep. So that's what you can look forward to. The other thing was the buyout window opened last Friday, 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time.
Mm-hmm.
And as written about on Zone Coverage Monday, Tyler Ennis, popular name in pretty much anyone's buyout list. With just 1 year left, the forward has a $4.6 million cap hit, and a buyout would cost Minnesota, it was like $2.4 million, 2018-19, and $1.2 million in 2019-2020.
Sure.
But as I wrote on zonecoverage.com, it is possible for the Minnesota Wild to still make all their moves this offseason and get by without buying out Tyler Ennis, which I think they should. And you disagree.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if the cap goes up, I get your argument. It makes sense, and you know, like we discussed, I mean, he could do worse if he's your 12th, 13th forward. I don't think he was that abysmal, but at the same time, I mean, he wasn't any kind of level of good either. So I just assume buy him out. That 1 point whatever next or the following season really isn't a big deterrent for me. Like it's 1.2 something, and I just as soon see him gone, and I'd rather they give that spot to somebody who, you know, might actually do something with it.
I mean, you don't have to buy out somebody. It is okay to not do that. Like, and as I said at the end of the article, Paul Finn probably will buy out Tyler Ennis because he neither signed that contract or traded for Tyler Ennis. So it just makes it a lot easier for him to just say, I'm going to buy it out. But if the cap is above $80 million next season, if it's between $80 and $82 million, it could be, from what we've heard, anywhere from $78 to $82 million. But if it's $80 million or above, I think the Wild can get by, and you know, you can still make your trades. And as I pointed out, the Wild aren't just going to trade and take on salary or dump salary like most teams in the league, unless you're trading with like Arizona or Carolina. You're going to have a pretty even salary structure in a trade. It just, every team is going to be right up on the cap.
Right.
And so you have room there, and I just hate the idea of having another player on the books for another X amount of years that's not actually on your team.
It's the ghost of Fletcher past.
I would rather suffer through another season of Tyler Ennis and have that be the last one and just be rid of his cap hit than have 2 seasons of him not on the books. I have seen the Wild just at some points decimated by having this empty cap space taken up by a buyout, and just have that not allow them to call a player up if they need to. So many times, whether it was the Mark Parrish buyout or the Matt Cook buyout, or now the Thomas Vanek buyout, which has just gracefully ended.
Yeah.
There have been too many. I get it, Tyler Ennis was not good, and Bruce Boudreau did not play him down the stretch or in the playoffs, but
right.
If you think you can win with this team still in the long term, and you just need to make a few moves here and there, like actual hockey trades, just suffer through one last season of Tyler Ennis. Use him as your 12th or 13th forward.
Yeah.
And go bargain shopping on July 5th in the free agent market, because everyone is done shopping on July 5th. They got Daniel Winnick for, I think it was $850,000. It might have been less than that, last September. And that turned out to be pretty good, as he was a pretty valuable player in the last half of the season.
Yeah. A hell of a lot more so than Ennis. No, I understand what you're saying. I don't think that... what I do think, because there's the second buyout window after free agency, I think we don't see him bought out until then, because there's still moves to be made, and I think if they haven't bought him out yet, or if they haven't traded him yet, I really doubt they'll find a trading partner. But if they haven't done any of that stuff yet, I think maybe Fenton is playing kind of a wait-and-see approach on it, because I don't think anybody actually wants to buy people out. But he'll do it if he has to, like we kind of saw with the Vanek buyout. They didn't want to, but they kind of more or less had to. I think that's what we see. I think so. If there's a big move and they don't end up saving any cap on the move, maybe they buy Ennis out. But, if they end up making some moves and they somehow save some cap space... Yeah, I mean, you'd rather, like you said, you'd rather not buy somebody out. So it'd be nice to just kind of, stash them away and use them sparingly and then move on. I just don't know that his moves are going to free up cap space. This is what I'm saying.
I noted that in that article that, Matt Dumba and Jason Zucker are going to take up a lot of the free cap space the Wild had. And I also want to remind people out there that if you look at Cap Friendly right now on the main page, that cap space it gives you for the Wild next year is inaccurate. That is projected on a $75 million cap, which is what it was last year. The actual cap is going to be at least $78 million, if not more. So what I did was I put it in the middle, $80 million, and I used Evolving Wild's contract projections, which are very good, and I'll kind of be interested to see how those play out this year. But on a $80 million cap, Matt Dumba got a 5.26 cap hit, and Jason Zucker got a 5.12 cap hit, which pretty high, and there's probably plus or minus 250K either way, I guess. But the point of it is like you sign those guys to cap hits in that range, and then you get Nick Seeler locked into probably a bridge deal for 800, 900 million. You still have $4.5 million of cap space.
Yeah.
And you would just need to sign, another forward or two, or you could simply call up a forward from Iowa, Sam Ennis. You probably sign a left shot defenseman because I don't think you're going to hang on to Gustav Olofsson to kind of be that 6th, 7th defenseman. And your team is set. There's still trades to be made, but like I said, salary's going to be relatively even unless you're trading with Carolina or Arizona. But actually, it might not even be Arizona anymore. They might actually try this year.
Right, yeah. So they're kind of pushing in a little bit. No, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I just, I don't know. I guess we'll see. I think, like I said, the big thing is what moves that Fenton is able to make, before and even after free agency, in the draft and free agency here in the next week. That will be kind of that'll be the real, sign as to whether Ennis stays or goes. Because if he's able to free up cap space, he's probably the same mindset where it's like, well, you know what? We could do worse, and I don't really feel like having $1.25 million on the books next season for no reason. So maybe we do. But I think if things get tight, that $2 million or so savings that you get from buying out Ennis this season is going to look pretty enticing. So it just kind of boils down to what moves are made with the rest of the roster.
And I left it with, and this wasn't, not just Wildwood, but everybody else finds a way to get around cap problems. And the Wild buried Nicholas Backstrom for nearly 3 seasons with his albatross contract. The Kings got out of the frickin' Mike Richards contract by an act of God.
Right.
The Blackhawks who should be charged with cap circumvention because Marian Hossa has retired and they somehow don't get penalized because he has pad itch or whatever the hell that is.
Well, because he hasn't actually signed his retirement papers. He's flat out said he retired, but he's not signing his retirement papers because if he did, the aforementioned cap recapture penalty would hit them. Which is, yes, complete bullshit.
I'll hate that rule until it kills the Wild with their 2 albatross contracts.
Oh, it's going to get ugly.
And so this is kind of off topic, but I wanted to float this by. It was just kind of an NHL change for maybe the better, but in the next CBA, what if a rule got put in that if a general manager gets fired and then replaced, but there'd have to be a certain period for this to happen, say it has to be at least 4 years for you to do this. You can't just fire your GM every year. But when you make a change at the general manager position, that general manager gets an amnesty.
It's interesting. I don't think the players' union would be really too hot on that.
They're still getting paid. What do they care?
Well, I suppose
if it's amnesty, is on the books for another 30 years.
I guess.
I don't think he cares.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just and I don't know. What, as we almost are to free agency, I was thinking about this too. What do you think of contract length for players? A free agent can only sign a max of 7 years, and then the max, if he's re-signing with one team, is only 8 years.
Right.
Do you think that's a good amount, or?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I don't have any issue with that. I don't think that it's really limiting teams at all, and if anything, it maybe hurts the players a little bit because you don't end up with the Preezy Suter albatrosses. But at the same time, I don't, things don't really turn out with those kind of contracts anyway. If they kept the Preezy Suter contracts around and next lockout they get an amnesty buyout, well, they're as good as gone. So it's I think it's fine. I don't have any issue with the salary links. I think it's, when you look at the other professional sports, I think it's pretty in line. I know baseball doesn't have any limits, but even baseball very famously this winter figured out that you shouldn't hand out long-term contracts to aging players, and so I think there's been, there's kind of a market shift in that as far as analytics go, and helping out with realizing that no one under any circumstances should sign players to contracts that long. And that's just kind of, what the market's going to look like now. It'll be interesting to see if that kind of thing hits hockey, but I don't know. I get the feeling that it's not really going to matter when it comes to John Tavares this summer.
I don't necessarily like them. I think they're too long. And
sure.
And, let me ask you this. If you think of a player who has signed a contract that's 6 years or longer, how many of those do you look back and go, that's a good deal?
Oh, almost never.
Exactly. Unless it's, the top, elite player, best at handing a Connor McDavid 8-year contract is, no one's gonna regret that.
Right.
Handing John Tavares his large contract, no one will regret that. But you get kind of into that next tier of players who cash in big in free agency, and then you start to go, okay, yeah, players who sign long deals, that often doesn't work. So I guess I would hope for in the next free agency is maybe shorter contract lengths, but I probably won't get that because NHL general managers are not smart. They're not smart. They toss money and contract length around like no one's business, and it just cripples this league into the fact that nobody can make any kinds of significant trades anymore. They essentially have to be like a 1-for-1 or 2-for-2, and even then they're just kind of dull because nobody wants to take on everyone else's crap.
Right. Yeah, I think the only you're obviously going to get opposition from the players' union on limiting contracts, and that's a very pro-labor argument to not limit the amount of money these guys can make. But at the same time, I think what a lot of the pro-labor types don't understand is that this is a salary cap league. So yeah, should players deserve to make whatever money they want? I suppose you can make that argument, sure, but then on the flip side of that, on the backside, as we saw with Nicholas Backstrom, you're hindering teams' abilities to sign other players. So I'm with you, and I don't, the short-sightedness of the players' union is pretty well documented. So I don't think that they would be for anything like that, but it'll be interesting to see. We're all but guaranteed for a lockout in some form in 2020. We're kind of resigned to that fact now, but I don't know. It would probably be helpful for the teams, obviously, and it might even be helpful to the players in kind of a roundabout way, but I just don't think we'll see any kind of further limitation.
Speaking of cashing in free agency, Barry Trotz hit the market. As we did not record Sunday night, we held off till Monday night to record this otherwise fine podcast, and Monday afternoon it was announced that Barry Trotz stepped down as the head coach of the Stanley Cup champion Washington Capitals. And by winning the Stanley Cup, it was revealed that a clause was triggered that gave a 2-year extension to Barry Trotz. But both sides just kind of stepped away because they tried to discuss a new contract in which Barry Trotz was going to get paid big bucks, but apparently the term was not good enough. Or too large, I should say, for the Washington Capitals. And then they stepped away. And that leads to this. Once the news that Barry Trotz was on the market, It kind of started to get out there who he could go for. The New York Islanders, heavily talked about.
It's the only opening.
But then the team number 2 that I kind of saw most frequently rumored for Barry Trotz was the Minnesota Wild. I guess I shouldn't say rumored, I'd just say talked about.
Well, by Wild fans, right?
Well, no, and then just general hockey people. Like,
oh,
I just, no. And I put it out there on Twitter. Barry Trotz will not be the head coach of the Minnesota Wild. Craig Leopold made it abundantly clear that whomever his general manager was going to be, Bruce Boudreau was going to coach this year. 2018-2019. And before this last season, if you polled Wild fans on who you would rather have coach the Wild, Barry Trotz or Bruce Boudreau, I'm thinking a large quantity of them would say Bruce Boudreau.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, Barry Trotz and his Stanley Cup pedigree, in air quotes, hit the market. And I'm sorry, I don't see the need to make a switch. As I threw it in the YouTube mailbag last week, the question I hit right off the hop was, should Bruce Boudreau be on the hot seat going into next year? And I said, yeah, he probably will be because he's got a new boss and, he was not hired by that guy. So generally when you see a new GM take over, head coaches just get fired immediately and GMs bring in their own guy. But Bruce Boudreau is going to get a year, and as I kind of said, unless he takes the Wild, maybe third round or more, maybe he doesn't come back the following year. But that's just conjecture on my part. But going into next year, I still think the Wild are better with Bruce Boudreau than Barry Trotz.
Yeah.
And I didn't tweet this because I didn't want to get a lot of angry, not just Wild fans, but Caps fans in my mentions. But before this last year, Barry Trotz was Bruce Boudreau light.
Yeah.
Bruce Boudreau just had great records in the regular season with the exception of the year he got fired. And right. Barry Trotz, still pretty good regular season success, but not a win percentage close to Boudreau. And neither could get past the second round of the postseason.
Right.
So Barry Trotz was essentially Bruce Boudreau, but without the President's trophies.
Right.
Before this year. And now all of a sudden, because the Capitals finally got hot at the right time, and the Capitals are now being dumb and letting Barry Trotz leave, some seem to think it's time to make a coaching change. No. No thanks. The Wild will be much better going into next year with Bruce Boudreau than Barry Trotz. And let's not forget, when Bruce Boudreau took over 2016-2017, it took the Wild about 3 months before they finally started playing good hockey. So if you want to suffer through another first 3 months of the year where the Wild aren't playing good hockey, be my guest.
Yeah, I think that the only way that we see Trotz as involved with the Wild at all is after this season or sometime during this season if Boudreau is fired because the team absolutely craters. I don't think that's incredibly likely. It all kind of depends on what Fenton does with the roster this summer. But I kind of doubt they deal with as much injuries they did last season, so I don't think that the team is going to just suddenly suck up the joint, but who knows? So, sure, Barry Trotz could join the Wild at some point if Boudreau is fired, but I don't think that that's incredibly likely. And as you mentioned, Barry Trotz is not an upgrade. I mean, did he win a cup? Sure, but it goes back to the same point that I've made about Boudreau, is that, cup-winning coaches, aren't cup-winning coaches until they win a cup. And so it's you can't just say, Barry Trotz won a cup, he's automatically better than Bruce Boudreau. Well, that's not the case. Randy Carlyle has a cup.
Yeah. No, I mean, nobody's going to be jumping after Randy Carlyle when he's done with the Ducks.
Right.
I just... We can probably leave it at that, but I will just say Barry Trotz is not going to coach the Wild, and Bruce Boudreau will be the head coach next year, and we'll see what happens after next year or even during next year, but let's just kill that with fire now. Like,
right.
Barry Trotz is probably going to end up coaching the Islanders, and I, to that, would just say, no, don't do that. Just go out on top.
Yeah, I think Lou Lamoriello maybe increases the chance of that happening slightly, but I don't know. If I'm him, I don't take that job. I don't know. That's not a very enticing job, especially when Tavares bails.
I was going to say, the only way I take that job is if I have a guarantee that John Tavares is going to stay. And I just don't know if John Tavares is going to stay. So
I doubt it.
I hope Barry Trotz doesn't go to coach the Islanders. That's what I'll say.
It's possible.
Be great when they pay large sums of money for Barry Trotz and Lou Lamoriello and don't get John Tavares to resign. Also, speaking of, the other thing is, if you fire Bruce Boudreau now, you're still owing him $3 million for the next 2 years on top of what you would pay Barry Trotz, who was looking for $5.5 million from the Washington Capitals per year.
Yeah.
So you would have to pay him at least that, if not more, to sign here. So I don't know if Craig Leopold was going to want to pay two coaches $8 to $9 million per season. Yeah. Even though Craig Leopold is not afraid to open the pocketbook, I don't know if he would go for that. So it just no. Anyway, the other thing coming up this weekend, the NHL draft.
Yay!
Speaking of, you should check out the Giles and the Goalie podcast and the Hockey Wilderness Draft Party Friday at Tom Reed's Hockey City Pub in St. Paul. We will be there.
Yes.
But, Ben, you are highlighting a lot of players, a 12-pack of players for the Minnesota Wild who they could potentially select at 24th overall pick on Friday night. One, feels weird that the Wild have a first-round pick. And I guess I'll kind of throw it here. People talk about, not exactly drafting for immediate need. And if you kind of look at the Wild prospect pipeline and, maybe where they're at, they have needs everywhere.
Yeah.
So drafting the best player available fills some kind of need for them.
Yeah.
But do you have a preference on what kind of player they would take?
Not at all. I'm 100% in the best player available camp. And with this, this 12-pack of players that I've picked out, it's been a pretty even smattering. Centers, wings, defensemen. I'm not touching goalies because that's usually a rarity in the first round, but I guess that remains to be seen. But I think drafting for need is absolutely ridiculous. Like, the only place that should happen is the NFL, and that's because those players are ready, day one, because they've spent 3 years in college at that point. Otherwise, obviously, Major League Baseball doesn't do it. The NBA really doesn't even do it either. They just take the best player. And hockey, I mean, there's something to be said for filling certain spots in your minor leagues. If you're super heavy on one position or another in your minors, maybe you'll go after something that you're weak on. But I think you just go best player, and the Wild aren't even in that spot. The Wild, like as you said, have a lot of holes, so they should go best player. And there's actually some pretty. I mean, this isn't a terrible draft. I think we're going to look back and there's a lot of guys in this draft that I think are kind of boom or bust candidates that should be interesting, that go somewhere in the 20s. Might see a Vladdy Tarasenko type situation where you wonder how the guy slid that far, because he reached his complete potential. So I guess I don't know. I'm optimistic about what the Wild can get. There's a very real possibility that somebody pretty good is going to fall to them, or at least somebody with a very high ceiling. And that's pretty cool.
I guess, I had hoped to see the Wild maybe take a little more swing for the fences approach with their first round pick.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we're going to see that this year, as Paul Fenn still kind of has Chuck Fletcher's staff to make the draft picks. So it wouldn't surprise me if they just took one last safe pick.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say because, I mean, at the end of the day, Fenton's the one pulling the trigger. And obviously the scouting reports are what they are, but I think that Fenton has probably done enough to where, I don't know, I think that he can swing for the fences this year, and I think where the Wild are at, I'm probably going to write about this later in the week, actually, for zone coverage. I almost think he has to. I think a safe pick doesn't really do much for this team right now. Not that you have to, but for this system, rather, for this organization. I mean, they don't need guys that can fill roles in the organization. They need playmakers, and even though that player's not going to get to St. Paul for probably a couple of years, that's fine. The organization still needs a lot of high-end talent that they don't have right now.
Right. I thought I heard somebody saying how Paul Fenton really hasn't done much with scouting this year.
Right.
So that kind of gives me a little more inkling that, Brent Flair, who Paul Fenton has already said is going to run the draft table again, is going to make the call. And, we've seen them make that safe call time and time again. But, maybe Fenton leans on him and says, take a little more of a home run swing with this pick, not just the safe pick, the guy that is going to be a third line player in this league.
Right. And I think and you'll go over this if you do the article about Fenton's draft history, he's not been afraid of taking a guy who slides. I mean, I think a great example and something that gives me a lot of hope, quite frankly, is him drafting Eli Tolvanen last year. Tolvanen slid in the draft from maybe a top 5 pick all the way down to the Preds, and they were not afraid of drafting him, even though there was some question marks and some red flags. And he had a hell of a year, and it remains to be seen what he does in the NHL. But I would love to have a pick like that, and I think that's still a possibility, even though, as you said, Flair is running the draft and not Fenton.
Yeah. It's also exciting the Wild have a lot of picks, and as our friend Tony at Hockey Wilderness, he pointed out that this is their most picks in a draft year if they end up using all of their picks since I think it's like 2014, because they have a first, 3/3, and then it's a couple of fifths, I believe, and a sixth and a seventh. And
Sure.
Yeah, so that would be really good. And, as I've said before, it would not surprise me in the least if the Wild somehow use some of their thirds and trade it up into the second round and have a pick in both the first and the second round, which they haven't since 2015. And then the time before that was 2012. So from 2012 through 2017, the Wild had a pick in both the first and second round in just 2 drafts.
Yep.
That's not good. That goes back to what I said last week, where they've just had 5 out of 10 picks between 2013 and 2017 between rounds 1 and 2.
Last year it was neither.
Just using any of those picks, and that's bad.
Yeah.
That's why the player development is at where it's at right now.
Right.
So, the last thing I have on the docket, finally, we get to return our favorite segment, the Jersey segment.
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Oh, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
As asked in his mailbag by some dirtbag, Michael Russo of The Athletic said the Minnesota Wild will not have a third jersey next year, as they hope to... I don't even know if he said it, but they're just, still kind of in that honeymoon phase with their new home jersey, so
yeah,
maybe the following year.
Yeah, he said something to the effect of they want to get it right, which is, I don't know, I guess equal parts understandable and equal parts confusing, but...
That's weird. My phone has not rung.
Yeah, no kidding, right? And so maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe they just had to take some time.
They're trying to find our phone
wait
numbers.
For some contracts to come off the books, free up some cash, hire some jersey consultants. Maybe that's what they're waiting for.
Yeah, after July 1, when maybe they let some people go.
Right.
Our phones ring. Woo!
Yeah, wouldn't we be heroes if they end up letting the War and Ice people go and hiring us?
We'd be about as popular. No, I'm not going down that road. We already almost did that earlier. Never mind. Other jersey news that we need to talk about is one of our favorite jersey sites, Aesthetics, previously called on this podcast Ice the Ticks. Reported over the weekend that the Anaheim Ducks are going with a black third jersey for next year, and the rumored crest is going to be the Mighty Ducks crest.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
I have to see what the final result is, but boy, oh boy, my hopes are through the roof.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, certainly something that gives you hope. That being said, we're going to wait for the final product on this. But I mean, that's a pretty good start. Not orange, number 1, and the proper crest, number 2. And quite frankly, it would be hard to screw up at this point. But I don't put it past the Ducks to do it. So. I guess we'll see. I think all of the teams, I believe, are unveiling their jerseys at their draft parties, all the ones that are getting third jerseys this season. The Canes, the Yotes, and the Ducks. And I don't know if there's any other teams that officially announced it yet. So I guess we'll find out on Friday.
Yep. Boy, if they get that right, they have fixed one of 2 wrongs that organization majorly did a long time ago. And I hope they will follow suit and fix the second wrong. We all know what that is.
Yes.
So,
number 9.
Yeah, retiring.
It is interesting to me, though, like I just thought of this. All of the third jerseys that are coming out are going to be black.
I mean,
it's the 90s all over again.
That's not, depending on how they are, that's not necessarily bad, but
no, it's not, especially for the teams in question. Arizona, obviously, storied history with a black jersey. Anaheim much prefer a black jersey to an orange one, and the Canes can really only do a black jersey versus another red one. So yeah, no, it makes sense. It's not like all those teams that suddenly had a black jersey in the late 90s.
Right. So, all right, I think that can do it. Any final thoughts?
I'm pretty jacked about draft coverage. I think the draft is going to be fun, and I'm looking forward to hanging out with our friends at one of our favorite establishments. So yeah, check out my draft coverage, and it's not. I know draft coverage isn't for everyone, and there's a lot of casual fans out there that don't really follow the draft very closely. But I tried to make my articles, for the casual fan and something fun for everyone to kind of get a rudimentary feel for who these kids are, so that way you kind of have something to root for a little bit on Friday night. You kind of have something to watch for. And it kind of adds to your knowledge base a little bit as you may watch the NHL draft.
Right. You just tried to put your own spin on it. You have to.
I'm not copying and pasting from anybody. I'm just kind of saying, hey, a few people are saying this, a few people are saying that, and this is kind of how maybe you would react to it. We'll see.
Check that out on Zone Coverage. All the profiles Ben has done. You can check out my work also at zonecoverage.com/wild. That's where all of our stuff is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that can do it for us. Well, I guess my final thought is I don't know. Watch the World Cup, and please, God, don't complain about the diving. Like, this is what is kind of irritating. Is like, yeah, us soccer folk, yeah, we know like diving's bad, but then when like casual fan only watches World Cup every 4 years, jumps in and go, oh man, diving's so bad. This sport is garbage. Well, we know it's bad, but doesn't it say more that we still choose to watch the sport despite the diving? Maybe that shows how good it is. I don't know. Just a thought.
Well, to your point, I mean, half of those people that say that are probably NBA fans. And, I mean, if you've watched the NBA recently, it's getting to European soccer levels.
I don't know. I haven't watched the NBA in a while, truthfully.
No, I watched the playoffs and.
How many steps is traveling now? 10?
I think they've actually stricken it from the rule book. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
Right.
So. Yeah, so that can wrap it up for us, and we will chat at you again next week.
Later.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.